and you can have free access to audiobooks and ebooks for free. It's insane. Of people, I started off the new year with a ton of New Year's resolutions, but there's a really good reason that I never seemed to fulfill any of my New Year's resolutions. There were too many, and they were far too demanding. There are a lot of things that people don't talk about when making new goals, but here are the two things that have ensured my success. One, how can I make this goal compatible with my environment and my personality? And two, should this be a priority, and if so, why? My initial goal was to read a book a week, or 52 books in a year. And considering that I had not read a book for fun since the summer of 2018, me trying to make that extremely ambitious goal was equivalent to a couch potato signing up for a marathon. Now first, I had to unpack my motive for this goal. For example, if the reason that I wanted to get into reading was to show off to my friends or look like a bookish person who reads 100 books a year, that's a pretty weak motive. And this is because I'm doing it for the external reward of other people thinking I'm smart. And there's a wonderful podcast with Dr. Andrew Huberman. I really should have looked that up. And he talks about something very interesting. Dopamine. And even though he says that the general public usually thinks of dopamine as that chemical that's triggered in our brain from Instagram likes, it doesn't really work like that. He instead says that dopamine is Mother Nature's way of propelling ourselves through our goals, of leading us along the right path of what we want to accomplish. And if you've ever tried to build a new habit in order to accomplish a new goal, you know that it is difficult to sustain. And this part of the habit building journey has always been a mystery to me. Why did I quit? Why was I so motivated yesterday and just want to crawl into bed today? Well, he explains this, and he talks about a chemical in our brain called norepinephrine. It's this long word that I will display on the screen, and it just confuses me. It also makes me feel like simultaneously smart and dumb at the same time. Norepinephrine. So the chemical norepinephrine is stimulated in our brain whenever we want to get something done. It surges this sort of anxious adrenaline through our bodies that's needed in order to complete a task. You know, that kick in the butt you feel whenever you need to complete a deadline, especially for school, whenever you pull an all-nighter to study for an exam that you've not put 1 ounce of work in prior to the night before. It's beautiful. Now, dopamine, on the other hand, is a chemical that rewards those efforts that we make. Dopamine makes us feel good in the midst of hard work and habit building and spurs us to go on, to take more action. And dopamine is wonderful because as that stress chemical rises, dopamine can smack it down and push it down and allow us to work for long periods of time and get into that ever elusive flow state. It's also important to point out that because of this system of chemicals ebbing and flowing in our body, work isn't always supposed to be pleasurable. It's not always supposed to be fun and motivating. When that stress level exceeds our dopamine hit, and when we give up. Dr. Huberman also says that it's a very common misconception to think that dopamine is out of our control, and this is where our thoughts come in. He says that while it's impossible to control our thoughts, it's entirely possible to introduce new ones. So for example, let's say you've been running for 30 minutes a day for a while now, and you want to increase that time up to 60 minutes a day. But as you run, you quickly lose this motivation or the dopamine hit because you feel yourself getting incredibly tired around the 40 or 45 minute mark. So you stop. And in this situation, many of us would feel like a failure because we didn't accomplish our goal that we set out to accomplish. But not all hope is lost because we can give ourselves a hit of dopamine. That's right, we are somewhat in control of our brain chemicals. Crazy. Oh, I love information. And this isn't by suppressing thoughts or lying to ourselves or saying, oh, it's okay that we didn't get to an hour today. I'm not disappointed at all. That's a lie. Dr. Huberman says that we can give ourselves a dopamine hit by saying, yes, I didn't reach my goal, but I'm here, and I ran 15 minutes longer than last time. and I'm on the right track, which is honestly the theme of dopamine, is the fact that you're on the right track, you're doing the right things. And he says that this is why external motivators don't work long term. The thing that will keep us working for our goals is dopamine, and that's internal. That's all inside. He even references a study done at Stanford where they took all of the preschool kids who loved to draw into a classroom and would give them a gold star for every picture that they drew. Eventually, they stopped giving the kids gold stars, and guess what? The kids stopped drawing, sadly. And for this reason, Dr. Huberman says, we need to be really careful about where we get our dopamine hit from. Are we willing to let the absence of a gold star hinder our progress, our dreams, or our desires? Is to say, if I change my motive to read from being, I like the idea of being bookish and smart in order to please and show off to others, into, I'm curious about the world and I want to learn new things, that is a long-lasting initiative that hopefully leads to a lifelong habit of learning. And when you see reading like learning, you realize that there are so many benefits to this. For the sake of broadening your perspective, for becoming more empathetic and just learning about your own body, for becoming efficient. It's crazy. And it can even raise our IQ. I know, insane. Oh my gosh, we can actually become more intelligent by reading. The inner nerd in me is just wigging out right now. Now if you've Googled how to read more and you've watched a lot of videos like this, a lot of videos will tell you to just find books that you like to read. But I will say, in the beginning of my book journey, what hindered my progress was that I felt an immense pressure to read books that were only for smart people. These books would be classics, poetry, science, political biographies, etc. But here's the thing. I didn't really like reading any of these books, so I instead ventured to read something that I did like, and that was children's literature. Harry Potter, the Princess Diaries, Roald Dahl stories. And that's when I realized that children's books are perfectly reasonable and interesting to read as an adult. If you think about it, adult life can turn into a really dreary affair if you're not embracing your inner child from time to time. And when we talk about self-parenting or self-regulation, I think we often associate this with being really hard on ourselves, with making ourselves stick to our deadlines and never have a moment of fun. And really, it takes both work and play to stop making Jack a dull boy. Now let's put our thinking caps on and consult the enemy. Not really the enemy, I'm just kidding. Why do we like TV so much? 1, it's very stimulating, and 2, variety. Seeing as we've already covered stimulation, which can be achieved by reading books that we are actually interested in, let's talk about variety for a second. One of the amazing things about TV is its variety. That it can be a source of comfort depending on what mood we're in. If you're feeling bored, you can flick on a thriller. If you're nostalgic, you can watch a Disney movie. If you're feeling romantically jaded, you can watch a rom-com. And the same can go for books. This is why I read 3 to 4 books at a time, which I know sounds... I'm not bragging when I say that. It takes me a long time to finish all of the books, but I also never get bored, and I can just comfort myself depending on what mood I'm in. Another thing that we need to ask ourselves is, are we romanticizing the act of reading? Are we romanticizing reading because we saw Beauty and the Beast when we were little and looked at that huge library and just fell in love with it and wanted to dress up in flowy dresses and prance around like a Victorian lady in France? And then when we pick up an actual book, reality smacks us in the face and we realize that reading is just reading. And the reason that I ask all of this is because Kindles are beautiful, and I think the reason that people don't want to buy them is because they have romanticized the act of reading. They might be afraid, like I was, that I'm not an actual reader, I'm not an actual bookworm if I don't have the physical copy in front of me. You don't have to have a huge manuscript as thick as the Bible to be labeled a reader. And here's why e-readers are awesome. One, you can read thousands of ebooks for free. We're gonna get onto that in a second because it's so exciting. I cannot contain myself whenever I think about this. And two, it's incredibly convenient. And how can I read books for free, I hear you ask? Well, there's this amazing app called Libby where you can basically get an online library card for a library near you. And you can borrow ebooks for free. And you can have free access to audiobooks and ebooks for free. It's insane. Got this nice little Kindle. It costed like $70. And what's great about Kindles is that yes, I can read my 3 to 4 books at a time and take those 3 to 4 books in one compact device wherever I go. Another stigma that we should combat is that listening to audiobooks isn't really reading. Now, Leena Norms made an incredible video on this, and I will absolutely link it down in the description. But she points out that the original form of taking in stories is storytelling by word of mouth. And because I regularly listen to audiobooks in addition to physically reading, I've not only been able to read a lot more books, but I also look forward to chores now. I love washing dishes and sweeping the floors and multitasking because audiobooks can transport me into another world, away from brushing a broom across a dirty floor. Another thing that can hold us back from building these productive habits is our mindset. For example, I might feel the need to stop eating healthy altogether just because I'm craving some dessert. And if you find yourself in that situation, I would encourage you to pause and reflect. If you're setting a goal to reading more, it isn't equivalent to saying TV bad, book good. It's a call to moderation and appreciation for both mediums. So instead of saying to yourself, I have to read 50 pages tonight because that's part of my goal, instead try saying, I wonder what would happen if I took some time to read tonight. I wonder if I would feel more relaxed. And a lot of the time, what keeps us from reaching our goals is this mental blockage. It's these ideas that reading is boring, exercising is exhausting, that keeps us from even starting. Thank you for watching. You can subscribe if you'd like. That would help me out. You can like it if you like. You can dislike it if you disliked. Ooh, this is a long one. So many long ones.